And thank you very much for staying with us again on PM Express. The SAP region again is in turmoil, or is it? That's what I said. You disagree, but listen, from the rest of the world looking to this side of the SAP region, of the sub-Saharan Africa, when one country is up in flames, they see it as the SAP region is up in flames, and that's the context within which this conversation is going to be had. Implications for the SAP region. We're talking about the Guinea Coup. You've heard a lot about it, but there are some facts I need to bring to your attention. Why Ghana should be worried. Let's go through that. We know what has happened. He's taking over power in Guinea through a coup d'etat, another coup d'etat in the SAP region. And he's been chanted as a hero. And it's reminiscent of what we saw in the 70s locally here in Ghana. They are calling him Domboya. Just listen to BBC and watch International Wires and what the videos coming in from Guinea. He's been hailed as a hero and a savior. We know that he's indicated that they wanted to end. And again, another reference to what we become very used to here in Ghana in the 70s. Listen to why he's taking over power. He wants to end corruption. He wants to deal with the human rights abuses and mismanagement. Does it ring a bell? It does. But the point to note about this is he's one of more than 15 people that the UN itself is already raising questions about when it comes to their own human rights record in Guinea under Alpha Conde. All right, he served in the special forces, and the UN has been concerned about his own handlings and dealings when it comes to dealing with human rights among 15 people, and yet he says he's in to deal with this. So there's a conflict there in terms of, there's a sort of dichotomy in what is happening there. But of course, he's currently at the helm of affairs. I told you about the similarities between what is happening in Guinea and what has happened in Ghana before, and where he's taking his inspiration from. We are learning a bit more about this. It appears that he's taking a bit of inspiration from one of our own local heroes, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings. He's quoted him since taking over power. What did he say? Quoting former president, a late president, may he so rest in perfect peace. Damboya says, if the people are crushed, and this is quoting Rawlings directly, if the people are crushed by the elites, it is up to the army to give the people their freedom. This is according to Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings himself, who came to power in 1979, again through a coup d'etat. So you see where the inspiration is coming from. He's clearly read former President Rawlings, and he's quoting him. So that is an inspiration there for him, clearly, from what we're watching. So Ghana may have inspired a bit of this, but should we be learning any lessons from what has happened in Guinea? Some people say we should. Others say ECOWAS should do more. The reason why this is worrying for the sub-region is because of this data that I put here. In the last year alone, the sub-region has experienced as many as 4 coup attempts or coup d'etats that have succeeded. We have 2 in Mali. We have 1 in Niger, which was an attempted one, and then we have in Guinea, which is just what we're reporting. This is too high in 1 year. In 1 year alone, according to the BBC, this is how many they've counted in just a year. That tells you a lot is wrong with the sub-region. We're going to be delving into that. Those who understand it, written about this will join us. What really is happening in the sub-region? People thought the era of coup d'etats are over, right? This tells you far from over. 4 of them in 1 year alone. Pretty alarming, if you ask me. Well, we know that the leader of the coup says that a new union government, that is what they all say, right, will be formed very shortly. They said, of course, the fate of the ousted president is in your hands. He's safe. They promised us. The coup leaders have told the former ministers that they cannot leave. They have to hand over their vehicles to the military as immediately as possible. Now, however, the mining companies have been urged to continue the operations in the country. I asked my research desk to put this in the slide because this is important. Because Guinea is one of the world's leading producers of bauxite, very important ingredient in the production of aluminium. You know what has happened since this happened? Since the coup d'etat, the world price of aluminium had gone up the highest in decades, is being reported. That is how important Guinea is to the sub-region, to the continent, and to the rest of the world. And so what is happening in Guinea is important. People the world over will be paying attention to what is happening there. That's why we're also paying attention here in Ghana. Everybody's condemning this, right? But the key question to ask, and someone Kujo Tablakwa has written about this, AU, African Union, ECOWAS, all of them condemning this. Where were they when the seeds were being sown by the ousted president? It's a question that has been asked. What did they do about it, right? Some say they are as complicit in this as the man who took the gun and ousted the president. We'll delve into that controversial point shortly. But as you see, Condé has been the chief critic of secession of autocratic leaders himself. I mean, he took a lot of issues with those who have gone before him. His advocacy earned him a death sentence. He's had his own challenges with the Guinean regime in the past. He fought it quite sternly, and he came to power, as has been said, in 2010. Before he came to power, there was a lot of human rights abuses. 2019, there's a famous 2009, there's a famous case of a massacre in a stadium where 160 people were killed, 110 women were raped. This is in Guinea alone. And so he also came to power, wrote on that and came to power. And then he also started his own abuses. As we know, it came to a head when he decided to change the constitution so he can continue to rule. People protested. They were crushed. Lives were lost under his own regime, the referendum, right? And then when he got elected through this, some have argued, by the way, that because it was through a referendum that he extended his stay, that was a democratic process because the people endorsed it. Really, we'll get into that very shortly. But we have many African leaders, after he had managed to win elections, the opposition complained, still went there and applauded him, sat through his inauguration. Some say they should have taken a tougher stance on that. After serving for 2 terms, he sought a 3rd term, setting off a wave of protests. As you saw, many people were injured in the process. By the way, the person who has overthrown him now, he appointed. He brought Damboya had served in the as part of the France, lead forces. Was asked to come in by Mr. Condé, and as we know, the story is obvious for everybody to see. He didn't know that it was expediting his own political demise when he brought him in. Now, his main rivals, we know, had complained about his own tactics whilst he was in government. Opposition protests and labor strikes were characterized his leadership. So there was a lot of anger, public, dissatisfaction with the rule of Condé. And if you watch the footage that we've seen since the coup over the weekend, people are on the street jubilating. I listened to BBC. People had stripped naked, just out of joy that somebody, through the barrel of the gun, had removed the incumbent president, right? So we know that this is not something that you can take for granted. There are implications in there and a lot for the SAP region. My guest joining me right now, Samokudu Tablakwa, he's a ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. We have Professor Kwesi Eni, who is, of course, with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. But I want to take you first to Guinea, where we can speak to Mohamed Jallow. He is a member of the FNDC in Guinea and an activist there. Hansen, the citizen of Guinea as well, who are all joining us from Guinea. It is to them I want to start. Mr. Jallow, thank you for your time here on PM Express on the JoyNews channel in Ghana. What is the situation tonight in Guinea as we speak? I'm pretty sure curfew has taken hold now. Hello, Mr. Jallow. Can you please unmute? We can't show their images for obvious reasons. They've asked that we don't show their images. We know the situation is pretty tense, but they've agreed to talk to us, and we are grateful. Mr. Jallow, if you can please unmute your Zoom so we can hear you.
You hear me now?
I can hear you, yes. What is the situation tonight in Guinea?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Thank you for this privilege. The situation has calmed down. Actually, people have been rejoicing throughout the day. People have been rejoicing throughout the day. Different ways. The situation is calm. Everyone is rejoicing. People are happy about the coup d'etat, even though they're not calling it a coup d'etat. but the whole population is rejoicing and jubilating about it.
And we know that Mr. Dambuya had announced that he was going to form a new government, a union government, very quickly.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. And he had said, Mr. Dambuya had said that the former ministers and Conde cannot leave the country. What is the situation with them? Are they still in detention? Has anything changed with the former ministers and those allied to Mr. Conde? And as we try to fix that, I've just been joined, as I said, by Samuel Kudita Blackwell in the studio. We also have Hansen, who is obviously on the line also with us from Guinea. Hello, Hansen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, Hansen.
I'm getting you very well.
Okay, so I understand you're also in Guinea tonight.
Not enough solid. Okay, during Mr.
Sorry, because of the line with Jallo, let's try and fix that whilst I talk to Hansen very quickly. Hansen, tell me, you are in Guinea tonight, right?
Obviously.
Yes. I can see, we just heard from Jallo, who says there's been jubilation on the streets in Guinea. For those of us watching in Ghana, why will people be jubilating when a coup d'etat has just happened? Just give us a sense of why there's been jubilation on the street.
Okay. This is due to the fact that the just dissolved government had ruled with a kind of maximum oppression. And this has been the case since 2010, arbitrary arrestations and injustice, and a whole lot of it you can mention when it comes to malgovernance, corruption, and a whole lot of it. And besides, if you check the international board, Guinea is known as one of the richest countries, perhaps 1/3 of the world readily exploitable deposit of bauxite, but at the same time known as one of the poorest countries in the sub-region. So all of this is due to malgovernance. So the government that is, let's say, orchestrating this act has just been dissolved, has just been arrested, and we might call it, won't say humiliation, but we'll consider it as a kind of justice rendered to the entire country, because these people had long been oppressing the Guineans. So seeing them out of the way is a kind of joy, is a kind of feeling of satisfaction that people are expressing through the videos you're seeing online, on media and everything. So this is the situation, because people feel very relieved. We feel as if we have just been freed. Let's say freed. Yeah, we've just been freed from an oppressed government.
Let me ask a curious question. Mr. Conde just recently won an election. Not only that, he also held a referendum which endorsed his extension of stay in power. So what has changed? This has been over a few months.
Okay, the polemic around his third mandate is that, for the mere fact that the Constitution allows for a leader to rule for only 2 mandates, which he had already done, and just for him to had also breathed a third mandate, he went as far as modifying the Constitution in his own favor. That is allowing him to contest for another mandate. And this is something that really didn't go down well with the country. And besides, there is this issue of ethnical politics that has been reigning in Guinea. So there is a sect of group or ethnic that feels deprived of political leadership in Guinea. And this oppressed group of people, I will say, had always been on the search to dissolve this government. So this third mandate, officially by the citizens of Guinea, was really not recognized. But out of let's say, out of, how am I to say, out of whatever means they used, they were able to manage to modify the constitution, which eventually led them to organizing an election that they won again. So absolutely or officially, I might say, not every Guinean was in favor of this mandate. So it was an unofficial leadership, let's call it this way. So this is the problem, and this is why people have always been opposing to his leadership for this mandate.
Thank you very much. Stay with me. So, Dr. Blackwell, this is exactly what you wrote about today. The Guineans are telling us tonight that there's jubilation, there's excitement, there's almost been liberated. And I asked the question, this is a man, Conde, was a man who recently just won an election. But he says, from the people's point of view, he didn't think that that election was a fair reflection of what people's wishes. So clearly, this had been coming. The signs were clearly there. How come all the bodies who are criticizing now miss this?
Evans, that's the fundamental question. And I would like to begin on the premise that we do not endorse coups. We do not wish it. Coups take us back, and they do not and should not have a place in any democratic construction where we seek to ensure that the people are governed by who they so choose. The majority decision at any point in time should be what holds sway, and not those who come with guns and bayonets. However, whilst we condemn the coup, as we say in in an African setting, it is the sages who say that when you fall, you don't look at where you are at the moment, but you look at where you tripped. And it is that kind of historical analysis, objectively, which ought to be carried out. And so when some of us point to the fact that this is failure on the part, particularly of the peers of President Alpha Conde, it is not to in any way endorse the coup. It is just to say that, look, this has been coming. You should have taken steps to avoid this.
What do you have done?
Now, you have a situation where President Conde decided that he will totally abandon the constitution which brought him to power. And you see, his story is such a sad one because he will have emerged as one of the success stories of Africa. Because he's one of those few grand old men who have spent all their lives in the trenches. For more than 30 years, he has been fighting for a democratic order. He has paid the price himself. He was sentenced to imprisonment for 5 years. He was only lucky to be pardoned. Now, after serving 1 year in jail, going in exile in France, and returning sometime in 2009, after a massacre of a lot of his supporters. Indeed, the international human rights activists put the figure at not less than 157. That matter has still not been, the leader of the military junta...
More than 100 women were raped.
Yes,
in the state.
The leader of the military junta, Camara, continues to be in Burkina Faso seeking refuge. The International Criminal Court is looking for him. President Conde himself didn't do much in bringing him to justice. It appears that they went into some kind of an alliance. But back to his story. He toiled, struggled. Even when he won the election in 2010, it was after a lot of anxiety. He could not win in the first round. And there were even ethnic conflicts that broke out. Earlier in the year, in 2010, November finally, after a lot of negotiations, the runoff came off, and he won. One would have thought that with this very rich history, where he can become an inspiration to a lot of opposition politicians and African democracy activists, he will have been a shining example. You managed to secure a second term. That is enough. But instead of bowing out after your second term, you then amend the constitution, go for a referendum. And that was a dubious referendum. I have read the ECOWAS Observer report, which said that he put in as many as 2.5 million ghost electors, ghost voters. 2.5 million, the ECOWAS report.
So it wasn't the people's verdict?
It was not the people's verdict. And you can tell
from
that
what we're hearing
from what is going on, the popular support. And you see that this coup, Colonel Mamadou Doumbouya, is enjoying so much legitimacy on the streets because of how the referendum was rigged, how the eventual election also was rigged. And the Observer reports are very clear. And yet, President Alpha Condé was a toast of his peers.
A lot of them were at his inauguration, actually.
They were all at his inauguration. He should have been isolated. He should have been called out. And you see, as an Nkrumahist, I feel very, very sad for what is going on in Guinea. Because you see, Guinea and Ghana, we have such an exceptional, historical, ancestral, bilateral bond. Remember that when Guinea was in trouble, Guinea is the only country that has benefited from a Ghanaian loan, 10 million pounds. No other country has benefited from that. And it's because Ame Sekou Toure, the Guinean founder, the independent president, saw Nkrumah as his mentor. And he learned a lot from Ghana. So he was inspired. After 1957 independence, he managed to lead Guinea to independence in 1958. We supported them. They were the only French country that publicly cut ties with France because of Ghana's support. I remember that when other African countries were feet dragging on Nkrumah's African unity agenda, it was Guinea and Ghana who in 1958 formed the Union of African States to inspire other African countries. Mali then joined in 1960. So these three countries, Ghana, Guinea, Mali, form a coalition of the willing. We then inspired other African countries, which led to the formation of the OAU, now the Africa Union. So, I mean, and you consider the fact that when Nkrumah was overthrown on 24 February 1966, President Ame Sekou Toure promptly invited Nkrumah to be co-president of Guinea. So there is only one country in this world where a Ghanaian has been president, co-president. And that is the country we are discussing this evening, Guinea. So, I mean, we have such amazing ties, such a beautiful story. And I have here Nkrumah's reflections in his days in Conakry, Guinea, and how well they took care of him. You remember he was there for 6 years. From 1966 to 1972, when he passed. Kwame Nkrumah was asked to chair the economic management team. He was addressing Ghanaians consistently on Independence Day, Republic Day, from Radio Guinea in Conakry. So this is how strong the bond is. And I mean, you cannot be a patriot, you cannot be a Pan-Africanist and not be heart-wrenched by what is going on. Ghana's progress should also be Guinea's progress, and Guinea's progress should be our progress. We should not leave them behind. That is why when I look at the numbers, you know, already remember they were ravaged by Ebola a few years ago. Over 10,000 of them died. Then you have had corruption, because of all the mismanagement, the multiple coups and all of that. If you look at the Transparency International latest report on Guinea, they've been on the decline, about 28 points now. You know, very horrible score. You take the UN Human Development Index, they are amongst the poorest country. They are in the last percentile.
Yeah, they are the richest in terms of...
And yet, in terms of resources, they are the richest. So it is such a sad story. But you see, back to the failure of the African Union, the ECOWAS, and to some extent the United Nations.
Yeah.
Look, since the 1990s democratization wave, after it was clear that the African people have had enough of the coups, from the first coup that happened in Ghana, 24 February 1966, all the way to the 80s. The 1990s ushered in a new era. According to the African Center for Strategic Studies, there were about 50 constitutions that were drafted in the 1990s. 30 of them had term limits. At least 30 of those 50 constitutions drafted in the 1990s had term limits. Evans, it will surprise you to note that only from 2015, over the last 6 years alone, not fewer than 13 have amended their constitution
to extend
to abolish term limits. And you know the sad thing about Guinea is that he was preparing to even run for a fourth term. He wanted to make himself life president at 83, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I mean.
Because, you see, what he did was to say that this is a new constitution. So it doesn't matter what has happened. My 2 terms will not count. So I'll serve, this will be my first term. I'm starting afresh. And then he will have gone again. I mean, holding the Guinean people to ransom. I mean, so you have at least 13 countries in 6 years who are amending their constitution. What is the AU saying about it? Nothing. What is ECOWAS saying about it?
It's interesting.
Most of them are West African countries.
It's interesting. I want to bring in Professor Eni. Prof, you are on record to have made the same points today. As we stand now, the AU has condemned what has happened in Guinea. No, sorry, the ECOWAS. But for some, coincidental reason, our president is also the chair of the AU. Do you share in Mr. Kudeta Blackwood's position on this matter, that the international community has largely failed the people of Guinea?
Yes, I do. The Guineans have failed themselves, and the international community has failed the people of Guinea. Look, Guinea, as a signatory to ECOWAS instruments and African Union instruments, expected that when it flouts or does not comply with the values and norms inherent in those protocols and conventions, that these 2 multilateral agencies to which Guinea is a member would automatically trigger some response mechanisms incrementally, so that the regime in Conakry is aware that its actions are not tolerable. But because failure or an unwillingness to apply the strictures within these conventions have become the norm rather than the exception, everyone who flouts these rules with respect to the rule of law, respect for human rights, democratic transitions, changes in constitution, and then extension of term limits. Because both the AU and ECOWAS protocols and conventions are very clear. There are certain things that member states cannot do. But we hear this deafening silence, and only an ex post facto response that has hollowed out the respect and the credibility of these institutions. So I do agree with the honorable member that to make these multilateral institutions count and matter, and to move away from being an annual jamboree of rhetorical flourishes, we must move on beyond just talking and signing documents to be able to elicit compliance either coercively or persuasively prior to these violent overthrows of government. Let me say this in support of the honorable. What has happened in Guinea is painful, It's something that could have been prevented. It's unnecessary, but nevertheless not surprising that it has taken place. What we are witnessing is a failure of leadership across our continent. And even when Mali and Chad happened, you and I had a conversation.
Yes.
If we don't step in and crack the whip and ensure that member states comply with what they have signed on to, definitely by December, you and I will be having this conversation with respect to 2 more coup d'etats.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, that is a worrying part. And I want to take a quick break. When I return, that's what I'm going to focus on a bit, because this is a sub-regional conversation. It is not a Guinea conversation. If you think this is Guinea, you're sadly mistaken, because of what Professor Inning just said. This has regional implications, and we have Mali, we have Guinea, we have what, Chad. There are several other that are currently now very destabilized, right? And so, and Ghana is almost always an island in the midst of all this. But this has implications for us. At a time when COVID has ravaged economies and West Africa is badly hit, listen, we need to find a solution to this. What is that? We'll return. I'll get the thoughts of Dr. Inin and Okuju Tablakwa to what this means for the sub-region and what ECOWAS should do about it immediately with the leadership of our own president. My guest in the studio is Samuel Okuju Tablakwa. He is the ranking on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Via Zoom is Professor Inning with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Earlier when we began, we got a very latest update from Guinea. I want to come to you, Mr. Okuju Tablakwa. Just before we went for the break, Professor Inning sounded pretty ominous that the sub-region isn't looking good. I talked about in 1 year we've had 4 coups alone. There's a serious attempt in Niger. We have 2 in Mali. We have 1 now. He says if nothing is done, we may even see more coming. This is a West African problem, isn't it? I want to isolate the rest of Africa and just focus on the sub-region. This is bigger than Guinea.
Absolutely, much bigger. Because if you look at the offending nations who are changing their constitutions to entrench themselves, you want to mention Togo, you want to mention Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, the Comoros, you have Djibouti, and all the way to Uganda, Chad. So it's
a lot of them in West Africa.
Yes, and the AU has been silent. ECOWAS has been, dead quiet, as Professor Enin was saying a while ago. So I'm not surprised that Professor Enin is predicting that if care is not taken by end of year, you may have 2 more. It's consistent if you read the literature around these matters. A number of scholars have been warning because the space for dissent is being closed. And when activists demonstrate or protest, there's a massive clampdown. People are jailed. Some are killed, some are maimed. They think they can use brute force to have their way. And we have seen what has happened in these countries. Unfortunately for the continent, the AU's agenda 2020, silencing the guns, did not work. And as Professor Ene will confirm to you, the guns have become louder, and worse, they have even proliferated. Yeah. And so you have small arms all over the place. Now, adding to that toxic mix is the threat of violent extremism and terrorism. So you have countries like Burkina Faso that more than 60% is gone. The government is not in control. The terrorists have taken over. The terrorists have taken over the Sahel region. And they are running the show. They are now controlling gold mines. They are in charge of the seas. Piracy is on the ascendancy. There's a lot of kidnapping going on, and ransom is being paid. Take with a pinch of salt when those governments say they are not negotiating with these terrorists and they are not paying ransom. A lot of ransom is being paid. So these terrorists have resources, and they are beginning to influence political parties, who should lead them, and how they should move in and finally take control. So it's become such a toxic mix. The security situation in the sub-region is so volatile that these undemocratic tendencies do not help matters at all. So, the citizens have more or less given a tacit approval, and they wouldn't even resist. They will not stand up to defend their constitution, because these are constitutions that have been mutilated already. They are constitutions that do not represent their hopes and aspirations. So they will not rise up to defend the constitution. And so it is such a precarious situation. And I'm not surprised that all the warning signs are that. Look, when Mali happened, all we saw was...
But there was an urgent meeting that the president called, and a lot of warnings and strict...
imposition of sanctions on Mali. So, we do not believe in early warning signals. We don't take it seriously. We don't do peer review. And President Mbeki had talked about the importance of an African peer review mechanism, where African leaders should sit and speak to each other truthfully and honestly. That's what we are lacking. So it's the AU, ECOWAS, SADC, EAC has just become a club where, you can do whatever you want. And you see, Article 4 of the AU Charter is being abused, where the claim is made that, as blocs, we don't want to interfere with internal politics. But there are exceptions there. There are exceptions in the Charter. We have signed on to other democratic and good governance, rule of law instruments that all of these countries have signed onto. And it mandates these blocs to intervene when constitutions are being torpedoed, when human rights are being violated. You have the right to protect. You have the right to intervene, to step in and save the situation from moving from bad to worse. So African leaders have absolutely no excuse. And you see, Guinea should serve as a wake-up call, that the earlier they start reversing the trend, a lot of these bogus and dubious constitutions that are being operated now, we must go back to all of them, from the Comoros to Djibouti to Cameroon to Uganda to Chad. Name them.
Yeah.
We must ask for a return to the proper democratic order.
Let me ask Professor. Prof, so what realistically can ECOWAS do, for example? Is it realistic to expect that they can do anything?
Well, it's not rocket science what ECOWAS can do. By virtue of the fact that people have signed on to ECOWAS's protocols and ECOWAS's conventions, by doing that, we have subsumed a part of our sovereignty under ECOWAS's supranationality, where Abuja can actually crack the whip and bring in all kinds of sanctions. Now, although ECOWAS is a member state's creation, it nevertheless gives the Commission the authority and a set of tools and is within that toolbox to be able to ameliorate state behavior. Now, if you look at particular types of leaders within ECOWAS at particular times, you would notice when the organization was driven by vision, by knowledge, and by panache. And I want to cite two particular instances. One was when ECOWAS intervened in Liberia under the Sierra Leonean executive secretary then. The second was when Dr. Chambers was the president of ECOWAS. loads of proactive diplomacy and interventions and the direct ability to speak in public to the infringements of heads of states and member states, okay, whilst using backdoor channels to ensure that he calmed the fires, the anger, and the excesses of member states. Since then, ECOWAS has been comatose. And ECOWAS of the people has become an ECOWAS of the heads of states club. Silent, distanced, ineffectual, and basically a supporter of what Honorable Ablakwa is saying. Basically unable, unwilling, and incapable of fulfilling the aspirations of the people of ECOWAS.
But some say these countries are sovereign. These countries are sovereign countries. And so
when you sign on to those protocols, you give up part of that sovereignty so that ECOWAS becomes a supranational organization. And that is why when we sign on to these instruments, member states are supposed to domesticate them. Otherwise, then we shouldn't be talking about issues of democratic transition. We shouldn't be talking about the rule of law. We shouldn't be talking about human rights. We shouldn't be talking about free and fair elections. These are the norms and the values inherent in ECOWAS's official instruments to which member states are voluntarily signed on to uphold. And by doing that, we have ceded a part of our sovereignty because the collective is more capable of delivering on public goods than the individual states. And that inability to elicit compliance has been a failure from Abuja, and it's a failure of individual leaders within the organization. Dr. Abbas Bundu led ECOWAS and cajoled member states to intervene in Liberia in 1990, when the responsibility to protect as a norm was not even known. But Abbas Bundu, as a visionary leader, told West African leaders, we can't allow our brothers and our sisters to be slaughtered in the name of theft, of a gangster like Mr. Taylor, and of a criminal field sergeant in the Sierra Leonean army like Mr. Fudisanko. Dr. Chambers came in together with Obasanjo, driven by visionary leadership and a desire to deepen democracy and constitutionalism. So we see, if you remember, the combination of Chambers and Baba Obasanjo, that you would dare not misbehave. Okay? Baba will not tolerate certain acts of behavior. Granted that Nigeria is a bigger state, wealthier, but when institutions work, they work because there's superior knowledge and ability to use that knowledge in ways to ameliorate and to shape behavioral change and attitudinal change.
Let me ask you, earlier you said that if nothing happens before the end of the year, you might see 2 additional coups. Which two countries are on your list to watch?
Well, I think, let me give some of the reasons why or what may trigger. Look, the demographics are a big problem. Young people are unemployed, unemployable, poor education. There's a sense of frustration, a sense of exclusion, victimhood, and dispossession. Okay? And across the sub-region, we are seeing, as Honorable Okuduto has said, the tinkering with constitutions, the suppression of civil society voices, the manipulation of media to tell a particular type of story. Yesterday morning at 7 a.m., the civil servants and Guinean media were praising the president. And today they've switched around and are praising the new man. Okay, in societies where there is suppression of dissent and the expression of free views, we never, ever get to know what is happening. And so if you use this as a criteria, probably my 2 countries is on the conservative side. We are on the cusp of going back 20 years, a conflagration that is much bigger than individual country coup d'etats. We are looking at a social upheaval of millions of youth, angry, frustrated, armed, using social media to share information, to organize, and to move. But we can pull back from the brink.
But Ghana is certainly not on this list, is it?
It's up to the listeners to determine. Okay, it's up to my listeners to say, do these variables fit? And if they fit, what can we do to pull back from the brink? I think Ghana, and Honorable Okujoto will agree with me here, has been a bulwark against expanding extremism. And there's one thing I want to share. In all the countries where we've seen coup d'etats and violence, all these countries, similar to Ghana, over the past 50 to 60 years, have been receiving security force assistance in the forms of logistics, of armaments, training, exchange of troops, blah, blah, blah. Mali has failed, Burkina Faso has failed, Niger has failed, parts of Nigeria has failed, and now Guinea has failed. What is it that has made Ghana's usage and appropriation of security force assistance fairly successful? Is because it is located within a country where, at least even when we disagree, there's a common vision that we seek to build functional, resilient communities and institutions. That is what Ghana can sell. That even with our problems, that we can share with other countries so they can learn from us.
Mr. Blackwell, so we have an immediate threat, which is Guinea, because others can copy. Let me ask you, the junta has already taken over power. Specifically in Guinea, what should ECOWAS do now? AU, UN, what should they do?
So the AU, ECOWAS, will have to immediately engage with the leader of the junta. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya must be urgently engaged. AU, ECOWAS can appoint an envoy and move in. This threat of sanctions and all of that, going hardline, I think that it should come in later when those talks have failed. Because at this point, it will appear that Colonel Doumbouya wants to transition. Listening to reports from the meeting he held today with the ex-appointees, with political actors, civil society organizations, he has promised them a transition. He's saying that even in the interim, he doesn't want to go alone. He wants to form a union government. And you are right that he's using a lot of jargons, terminology from Ghana.
Yes.
He seemed to have been inspired by President Rawlings. He quoted him extensively in his maiden address. And in the meeting today, he's talking about a union government, which is also a Ghanaian concept under Achampong. But be that as it may, I think that you have rich expertise. You know, people like Professor Enin are available. The ECOWAS can decide to appoint them. You have a number of heads of states who have left the scene, who themselves have good...
Even Chambers is still there.
Are good examples.
I spoke to him this year. He's
Dr. Chambers is, exactly. Is still very strong. I don't know how he does it. Looks so young and agile. So we don't lack the material, the expertise to move in. And to the extent that there's some leverage that Ghana also has. And fortuitously, Ghana is now chair of ECOWAS. President Akufo-Addo, our leader.
What should the president do? I guess it comes down to that because he's our president and he's a chair. Well, what should he do? What leadership are you expecting from him now?
So ECOWAS must immediately meet. He must call an extraordinary meeting. And then, as I've said, there should be a decision to engage. He can appoint an envoy who will inspire confidence so that as part of the transitional arrangements, this envoy can then shepherd the process. These coups often want to be guaranteed protection, that because even though this is an unpopular constitution, it is still subversion, and they would want to be given some safeguards. I think that diplomacy should set in, high-end sophisticated diplomacy should set in at this point, in the interest of the Guinean people and in the interest of the stability of the sub-region. But whilst that is being done, you know that there are too many hotspots. This is an opportunity to speak to all those other countries.
Don't wait to get to Guinea.
Who have amended their constitutions, who are very unpopular. As we speak, see what's happening to Bobby Wine. See what's happening to other opposition leaders from Djibouti to Comoros to Cameroon, you know, all the way even to Rwanda, you know, which is a success story in terms of vision and development. But when it comes to human rights, when it comes to political dissent, it's not a great story. This is a time for the AU to make all those interventions. And then, finally, the concrete problems in the continent, unemployment.
Briefly.
Unemployment, the despondency, how democracy, this new wave of democracy, the third wave of democracy, as the scholars would call it, has not so far delivered the goods. So young Africans are disillusioned. That's what's happening in Ghana. Fix the country. Nigeria, you saw NSAS.
Okay.
You know, you've seen it in Uganda and so many other places. It is time for African leaders
to deal with the root
causes, which is unemployment, lack of opportunity, and then to make sure that a new continent is constructed. Look, we must unite. Africa must unite. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area must be made to work.
I mean,
let's industrialize, let's create jobs, and let's
Mr. Blaffer, I'm grateful that you joined us on this. I mean, we haven't heard the last of this, but enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll come back on this because of its implications for all of us.
Hello, I'm Dori Nando. You can catch up with all the fun on the Cosmopolitan Mix and on all our shows via podcast. Just go to My Joy Online podcast and search for your favorite show and relive those moments all over again. Only on Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
Super Hits Radio, Joy 99.7.
Up close on Reason is Jesus. My name is P.P. Fulton, the Christocentrica.